Welcome to the Big Board Draft podcast, where once again we are continuing with the How to Scout by Position series. Last week, with one of our guests, Derrik Klassen, we broke down the quarterback position. Today, we have Ian Wharton also joining us, looking at the cornerbacks, how to scout the position. So first of all, Ian, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Just running on fumes. Didn't go to sleep last night to get this draft guide done, but I'm good. I'm good. Glad to be here.
Definitely excited to see the draft guide. Hopefully out tonight.
Yep. Sitting
And
at
what about you? Oh,
80%.
nice. And Derrik, what about you?
I'm doing all right. A little bit under the weather. I actually just copped Ian's draft guide, so I'm pretty excited for that.
So this is going to be Derrick's flu game. He's like Michael Jordan in a sense. So we're going to start right out with the cornerback position. Obviously, it's been a position that's growing in the NFL. NFL is becoming more of a passing league. The demand for cornerbacks is growing. So we'll start out with which important ball skill. There's a lot of debate about just how important is it, and that's ball skills. Derrik, we'll start with you. When scouting a position, how important are ball skills to you?
I think, with a position like receiver or cornerback, it's kind of a big deal because, you look at, I'll even take a player I really like Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith is a fantastic cornerback, in and out of breaks, recognizing routes, all that. But when the ball goes up in the air, sometimes he can be a little late turning around, and he doesn't have those interception numbers that you want from an elite corner because of that. So even though he's really good everywhere else, his lack of ball skills, he might not ever be a top 5 corner because of that, even if he's really good elsewhere. And then it can kind of help make up for some other deficiencies. Like I know Justin Gilbert, a lot of his deficiencies were made up just by long speed and being able to track the ball when it was back in the air. So I think they're a pretty good way to mask some other flaws as well as maximize their potential.
And Ian?
Yeah, a really good example of that actually is Asante Samuel. He was a guy that was beat a lot more than what you'd think, but he had tremendous interception numbers. I think ball skills are so important that I actually look at it 2 different ways. So the traditional sense of ball skills that I think that most, maybe big draft, big media, they tend to refer to it as, interceptions or I guess finishing at the catch point. That's a little bit different than ball skills for me. I think ball skills is something where I break it down like ball awareness and then ball skills. So being able to finish at the catch point is really important, but you have to be able to recognize where the ball is, where you're at in your route, as opposed to if you're just considering, well, he notched the pass, a defense pass. Yeah, that's nice, but are you doing it consistently? Are you consistently recognizing where you're at on the field, where the ball is? Because if you don't look back for the ball, that opens you up to penalties. It negates a little bit of the physicality that you're able to do downfield. So it's really important to actually locate the ball, even if you don't end up getting a pass defense or an interception. It can buy you the ability to play physically downfield. You'll see a lot of cornerbacks, especially young cornerbacks, unable to recognize where the ball is mid-air, and they'll get flagged in the NFL as a young player all the time. We saw it with Fuller last year as a rookie. He had a really good start to his rookie season, and then he got grabby, and he wasn't looking back for the ball as much as he was when he was playing a little bit better. So for me, ball skills are incredibly important, but not in the sense of necessarily just interceptions and passes defense. You need to be able to be reliable downfield in coverage when you're in single coverage.
And I think you just brought up a great point there because a lot of people, NFL, a lot of casual fans, they love the game, but it's a casual basis. When they think about ball skills, number one, interceptions, look at interception totals, judge who has the best ball skills, but it's really more about just intercepting the ball. It's about reading the ball, finding it, and so yeah. And then on to the next thing, because a lot of talk also about these cornerbacks press, but there's also off-ball cornerbacks. And so, Derrik, we'll start with you. How much risk do you see with these type of cornerbacks?
Personally, I actually it's not something I've thought about all too much. I mean, obviously, I think you want a guy who can both play at the line and play off. But I'd never honestly thought too much about guys that just play off ball. I know for one, Kevin Johnson's a guy I really like, but he plays a lot of off ball, so you kind of wonder if he's going to be able to go up and play at the line of scrimmage in the NFL. His slight frame and middling ability to handle blockers in the run game might it might make you worry about how well his strength is going to hold up at the line of scrimmage and if he can win at the line of scrimmage. So I guess that's kind of a concern. And then if they can't play at the line of scrimmage, you're going to have to kind of scheme around them and make sure they're off the ball at all times. But that can also leave you susceptible to a lot of short throws. So it wasn't something I had thought about all too much before. Ian had brought it up to me, but it definitely makes sense to have a little bit of caution when watching guys that really are only off ball.
And it's all about the transition to NFL. So Ian, for you, obviously, your work with cornerbacks, outstanding. So for you, looking at the off-ball cornerbacks, how do they transition to NFL, and what are some things that stick out to you?
I wanted to address it because it's kind of a dangerous thing. It's really easy to fall in love with off-ball cornerbacks because when you're 7 yards off the line of scrimmage, you've got your eyes trained on the quarterback the entire play, unless if the receiver starts to go downfield and you have to turn and run with him. So what's the advantage of an off-ball cornerback? Well, from a defensive standpoint, you're able to play off. You're able to hide some physical limitations. You're able to kind of protect against the deep ball a little bit easier because you've given that cushion. So it's a little bit more of a safer strategy than opposed to not even necessarily press, but just being on the ball, being on the line of scrimmage, lining up directly over your man. So it's a bit of a market inefficiency in the NFL. You'll see teams like San Diego, Miami, among a few others, that they look specifically for small cornerbacks that play off the ball. They're cheaper to get. Their skill set isn't necessarily as important as their technique. Their technique is extremely important. But the limitation is that when you're playing bigger, these are generally smaller players, so when you're playing bigger receivers, it's usually a lot harder to hold up in the red zone. It's harder to compete downfield at the catch point. And like I said, you're really hiding physical limitations. So these type of players will usually be a little bit stiffer in the hips. They won't be able to transition to full speed quite as well. There's a reason why they're playing off the ball. Some guys like Kevin Johnson, I think that was more of just a scheme thing. I don't think it was necessarily his talent. He was just in a situation where that's what they ran, and that he just kind of got stuck in it. Compare him to like Steven Nelson of Oregon State. He's small. He has to play off the ball or in the slot. He's going to get destroyed at the line of scrimmage against bigger receivers. And it's just the reality of that size. You're limited at that size. So I think it's important to keep in mind. I don't write off all off-ball cornerbacks. I love some of them. You just have to use them correctly. It's very difficult to take a guy like Steven Nelson and put him on Dez Bryant and have success.
And who are some of the off-ball cornerbacks in this class particular that you like or stand out?
Nelson's definitely the standout one for me. He's probably going to be a second to third round type. I would also mention Central Florida's Jacoby Glenn, just a redshirt sophomore. He's just a kid, but he's got tremendous ball skills. On day 3, you're going to see guys like Lorenzo Doss out of Tulane. He's a possibility. Also in the slot, Duran Grant from Ohio State. He's more of a size limitation than anything else. It's usually a very specific reason why you're looking at guys off the ball. It's not usually a great compliment to say he's going to be an off-ball cornerback in the NFL, although it probably should be a little bit of a better compliment than not, because you see guys like Brent Grimes, who's just fantastic. He's made a whole career being an off-ball guy. But those guys are few and far between too. So it's a fine line where like you don't want to fall in love with them, but you do have to realize that there is a place for them in specific scenarios.
Definitely, one thing that's going on right now, there's a lot of pro days going on. There's so much infatuation and love for the 40 times coming out. So Derek, starting with you, how much should 40 times be factored into the cornerback position?
To me, I think like if the player is not good, then they're not good, and a 40 times not going to make up for that. Like, for example, Trey Waynes. I'm pretty sure he ran the fastest or like one of the three fastest 40 times for a cornerback at like a 4.31 or something like that. But there's so much else to his game that he has flaws in that I don't think him running fast necessarily makes up for anything. I think I've said this on Twitter before. Speed is a maximizer, not a standalone trait. So I think if you don't have the other traits to make your speed worth, to make it a weapon, then it doesn't really matter all that much. Like if you're going to get beat laterally, what good does your straight line speed really do?
And Ian, what about you?
I think it's something that checks the boxes, and I feel that most of the stuff at the combine is like that. The combine is important, especially at certain positions, as Justice has shown many times that edge rushers and for cornerbacks, it's such an instinctual position that you really just want them to check the box. And what that means is, do they run under a 4.6, and does their tape show that they are pretty competent on downfield routes? If you run faster than a 4.6, historically, you're not going to be a cornerback. There just aren't many cornerbacks that have had success running higher than a 4.6. So you want to take the statistical odds there. People talked about Kevin Johnson and Mark Peters running 4.5s, and they acted like that was bad. When the average is probably a 4.5, 4.5, I think it's a 4.52 actually is the average in the last 15 years. So speed has much to like about it. I mean, it's sexy. It's something that oh, awesome. If you ran a 4.25, well, Ibn Washington did that years ago, and he was terrible in the NFL. There's a lot of guys like that where there's not many scenarios where you're literally running out of a track stance 40 yards down the field. So it just needs to be kept in perspective. It's nice to have, but like Derek said, it's not something that's going to make or break your game, unless if you're like really slow. Like if you're like a 4.8, that just kind of is what it is. You're just too physically limited. But if you check the box, that's all that matters.
I'm sure the Raiders are still enjoying their 4.28 DeMarcus Van Dyke at cornerback. That's worked out very well. And another big name that's been out there, I mean, he had the ridiculous 12'3" jump, which, I mean, they said probably a world record. Byron Jones out of UConn. Ian, starting with you, where do you, given those numbers, obviously, he battled a shoulder injury in 2014, but what have you seen from Byron Jones that you like?
I was fortunate enough through Optimum Scouting to watch a little bit of Jones before the season, so I had a really good idea of who he was before the combine. And it's interesting to see because I had in my notes before the season, this is clearly a good athlete. Like, I didn't think he was, okay, put it in perspective. He's one of the best cornerback athletes that's ever tested at the combine. I didn't think he was that good of an athlete, but it's clear that he has physical potential that needs to be unlocked. He doesn't play quite as smooth or as fluid as you would hope for a guy posting those type of numbers. You worry a little bit about how he's going to play against good competition because before he got hurt, he didn't play anybody. There was literally no one on that UConn schedule that is going to play on the NFL. When he did get hurt, it was against Justin Hardy, but Hardy was lining all up over the place. So it's tough to get a feel for him. His tape is good, not great. If you're investing in him in the first round, I think it's really off of that physical potential, and it doesn't quite translate to the field. Like, he's not a Patrick Peterson type player right now, where Peterson's elite just based off his athleticism, or considered elite by a lot just because of his athleticism. I don't see that type of smoothness in his game yet, but he's definitely that, for me, he's like a day two type that you want to try to unlock that potential.
And Derek, for you, I mean, obviously we've talked in the past about potential and, developing at different very position, but for you, looking at someone with this much potential, but, it doesn't always show up on tape, what are your thoughts on Byron Jones?
I actually haven't gone too in-depth with the corners this year. Like, I think I've only seen 6 or 7, and Byron Jones isn't one of them. I remember talking about Jones last year with Ethan Hammerman because he came up when I was watching probably Yalwyn Smallwood or something like that. And I just remembered this corner continually making plays, and that was Byron Jones. So, I mean, on live views or like unconcentrated views, he's always looked like a good player, and then his combine was absurd. So, I trust Ian when he says day two, and that's probably fitting for an absurd athlete like that.
Another trend we've seen recently, especially because of the Seattle Seahawks, is the growth or the desire for big, lengthy cornerbacks. So, where do you think that? I mean, why do you think this is growing among the NFL, and does it make that mold better? Does their size make them better than other cornerback molds?
Um, in my opinion, good players are good players, and you being big doesn't necessarily make you good. Like I remember last year, McGill was his first name Keith, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, him. He was this big corner. He had the stature and raw strength to be a physical press guy, but his technique was bad, and he was just bad changing direction. He wasn't very good, keeping up with receivers. But he had this big frame, so people kind of fell in love with him. And people are trying to make out all these big corners to be good, and not all of them are going to be that good. I think a lot of people were. Personally, I was a fan of Stanley Jean-Baptiste, and people were making Jean-Baptiste be on the same caliber as McGill, and I thought McGill was just a much lesser player. And then another thing with these big physical corners is it kind of seems like they take time. Like, you look at Seattle, and they have a lot of these big press corners, but a lot of them took time. I mean, you even look at Richard Sherman, who was like a fifth-round pick, converted and from receiver, and it took him, a couple of years to really be who he is. So I think you kind of have to expect development with these guys, and for them to be able to craft their game and not just expect to win by hitting guys at the line of scrimmage.
Definitely, you mentioned Baptiste. I mean, with NFL fans and stuff, there's the desire for immediate action, producing immediately. But even Sean Payton, who at the NFL owners meeting said, listen, we knew Baptiste was going to be a developmental guy. It was going to take him time to get on the field and be a productive player.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian, what about you when looking at this position? How do you factor in size and compare when comparing 2 or 3 prospects?
I mean, it's nice to have. There's really only one team in the league, though, that's really hitting on these big cornerbacks, and it's Seattle. They've just found their formula, and all their guys that they pick, when they pick a late rounder this year, on day 3, if they pick a cornerback, watch, he's going to pass all of the same filters that the other guys did. Jeremy Lane was a guy that we saw contribute last season that fit that mold as well. They look for long guys. They look for very specific things. And if you're not picking within those specific filters, those guys aren't really having too much success in the league. So it's kind of like speed, where it's nice to have. It allows you to do a little bit more. But it's almost impossible to find a really big dude who's fluid enough to actually turn and run in coverage. And those guys usually get away with more of their physical capabilities. So, it's a fine line between those really small off-ball guys and the really big physical guys. I mean, honestly, you almost want to end up in the middle. Most of the top cornerbacks in the league are right there in that middle, like 5'11" to 6 foot range. That seems to be like the sweet spot for fluidity, speed, and really just talent.
Definitely, and we will have upcoming how to scout safeties in the future. But one thing that we are seeing more is that with some of these cornerbacks, like Eric Rowe, for instance, people are talking about transitioning to safety. Ian, we'll start with you. Where do you think that idea comes from, and how easy or difficult a transition could that be for these players?
I think it's a natural thing for people to kind of drift towards, because if you see a guy get beat every once in a while, it seems to get accentuated. I mean, all cornerbacks lose. Darrelle Revis gets burned. Richard Sherman gets burned. It is what it is. The guys are going to lose, and you just you take the L and you move on. It's the NFL, so it is what it is. And I think that we need to kind of keep that in perspective. And I see a lot of people say, well, this guy, he'd look better at safety. Well, why? Necessarily. And they tend to point to things like, well, his technique isn't there, or stuff like, well, technique can be learned. The NFL really needs cornerbacks. Every team in the NFL needs a cornerback every year. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. It's just like a quarterback. Like, you should almost take one in every single draft just because they're that valuable right now. And so to move a guy from cornerback to safety, which it's very hard to find an elite safety. So for the most part, you're going to be moving a guy from cornerback, a position of need, to safety, where at best most guys are going to be an average safety. It just doesn't make sense. It's not that hard to find an average safety, whereas it's kind of tough to find an average cornerback that can start. So it's just a positional value thing, where I think that it's important to keep in perspective exactly what's more important to the team's success.
Absolutely. You know, some will point to Devin McCourty, but that's one exception, not the rule. And before we go, because we also have Ronald Darby set up, but one thing before we get into that, Derek, starting with you, when scouting the cornerback position, what are specific things you're looking for?
One thing I like to harp on is false stepping. Like it's a lot of things with false stepping is it doesn't really, like, if you're not paying attention, it doesn't really look like anything happened. But you can see just a split second of hesitation, or one extra tiny step when they're flipping their hips and changing direction to shoot inside to a slant. You watch Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett was so good with his feet, and that's part of what makes him a really good player. But then you look at a guy like I hate to harp on him all the time, but Trey Waynes. I see a lot of with Trey Waynes. He takes an extra step when he flips his hips, and I don't really like that, and I think that's really going to cause him issues at the next level.
And Ian, obviously you've done you have the NFL draft guide coming out, so the amount of cornerbacks you've watched this year and past years, so you're basically an expert in the area. What are things you look for in watching cornerbacks that younger people could look for as well?
Yeah, I would definitely go with Derek on footwork is extremely important. You just can't be making false movements. As soon as you do, you lose. And I mean, I guess that's where the speed comes in, and people say, well, I can make up for it a little bit. You have to pump the brakes a little bit there, because a lot of these NFL receivers are running the same exact time as these cornerbacks are. So all of a sudden, if he's much more efficient in his feet, then guess what? You're going to lose. I think the most important thing for me is really mental for cornerbacks, and that's what makes it kind of difficult to scout, is because we have no way to quantify that outside of just watching the games and hoping that we're watching the right games to get a good feel on some of these guys. The more exposures, the better at cornerback. So if a guy if he knows the tendencies of the player, where you see the elite guys, you can tell they study, they know the exact thing that the quarterback's doing, they know what the route runner's doing, they can tell their movements, how they're selling their route. Brent Grimes is just phenomenal in this area. If you want to see how the best does it every week, Brent Grimes is the guy to watch. He's small, he's fast, but he's not super fast, but he wins with his mind every play and with his feet. Just so efficient with his movements, and he just gets to the point. He knows exactly where you're running, and he's going to run that route for you.
Now, as part of this big board draft, How to Scout series, we take a look at some of these players, because a lot of people they can hear things and pick it up, but for some it's about visually seeing it and being told what to look for to help them going forward. So today we're looking at Ronald Darby versus Miami. Excuse me about that. We'll be looking for Ronald Darby at versus 2014 against Miami. Before we watch it, Big Board Draft we're using are not hosted on the server. The original video content is not considered property of Big Board Draft. Video is considered to be used under the Fair Use Doctrine of the United States Copyright Law, Title 17, U.S. Code Section 107 and 118. Videos are not used on the site for education. Videos on the site are used for educational purposes only, and Big Board Draft staff do not claim ownership or any original video content. So with that, we will get into Ronald Darby versus Miami in 2014. And Darby is someone who we've seen a lot lately. Has become a hot name who a lot of people are pushing up their boards.
I was just watching this game last night, and if I remember correctly, he slips right here. He does it like multiple times in this game, so I don't know if there was rain.
I think he ran into a teammate.
I think he slips right before that, though. I mean, and then he tries to get up and runs into his teammate.
Yeah, so already
right off the line.
Yeah, you could already see his balance right off the line was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
He was
looking
back. Yep, he's looking to flip his hips open. Do you want to bring that back, Matt?
Yep.
It looks like he takes the jab step to the outside and tries to flip his hips, and that's something I noticed in the game a lot last night. Is he tries to flip his hips really early.
Yep. Yep, and that's something to always watch with these corners. If they're flipping their hips super early, that's a huge issue because it's just giving away the route. And like you'll see Andre Johnson just destroy guys with that every single game. All of the good outside receivers in the NFL will just destroy that. Which is really weird because Darby is, I mean, he tested out as a good athlete. He's really sold as like a really good athlete. So you really don't want to see that from a guy that's athletically capable of mirroring. Yeah, this was a bad play. This is the play I was
I'm
thinking.
assuming he did the same thing.
Yeah, I think they might show a little bit of it. Because Dorsett put a clinic on both him and Williams this game. This is what should make people pause about looking at these guys into the next level. Dorsett has NFL quickness, and he's got that next level speed. So right there is where he lost it. As soon as he went to that inside route, Darby was flipped open to the outside. Yep. Yep. Boom. Flips over. It's already over by the time he flips to the outside. Like that's such an easy throw for an NFL quarterback. Right there. It's already over. And he's not even close to the top of his route yet.
I mean, my thing with flipping your hips is I don't really understand. Like, you're pretty clearly limiting yourself if that's what you're going for, because you're saying, okay, if you try to run to my outside, I'm gonna have you beat, but you can pretty much take anything inside.
Yep. Yep. And maybe it was a situation where he thought he was going to get safety help. That's one scenario that I could see by flipping your hips, closing off, or starting to go towards the sideline. If you have free safety over the middle, all of a sudden that's not a big deal because then you're going to hope that roaming safety is going to make the right play. But just by the play design, it's just that was never there. So either it was a miscommunication, and I'm wondering if Darby just misplayed it as far as communication-wise, and Ramsey was supposed to be over the middle. Yeah, I mean, as you can see there, they just circled. They got a bunch of dudes just chilling in the middle of nowhere. So maybe that's more of a miscommunication error, but still tactically, you still don't want to close off that quickly, especially against a guy like Dorsett. So he's playing boundary. You see him flip early, which a lot of guys do that. It's not a huge deal. It's tough with Darby too because he really wasn't targeted too often.
I at least like that. He's someone that has shown they move around. He can play both sides of the ball. And I'm not saying cornerbacks have to, but I mean,
it's nice.
It's nice, exactly.
And he can play slot too. Like he's a really physical player. Like even right there, just even the closing ability, getting inside for C, boom, ball awareness right there. That's exactly what I was talking about with ball awareness. Go up, look at the ball. Now he can make contact even if he's not playing the ball and get away with it. That's crucial. You've got to have that. And Darby doesn't show that very consistently. I'll say that. Just watching 6 or 7 games off of him, I didn't see that consistently. But right here, that's a big-time play. That's an NFL-type play. Nice play by Dorsett, too. Although he didn't come down with it.
Yeah, still
for a smaller guy, that's a nice play. Yeah.
I mean, he sort of helps make that play there. At least with Darby, you can see he's trying to get in and do something in the run game. Not that he's necessarily dominant there, but at least he's putting in the effort.
Yeah, he's got a tough mindset. Like I can see why people really like him. I don't really get the first round hype off of him. That Matt Miller's been putting out there, but yeah, he's got that tough mindset, which you really want to see. It's not a need I'd stop short of saying that it's a need because you see a lot of guys like Desmond Trufant. Like that dude has no interest being physical, and he's a great cornerback. So it's just one of those things. I mean, Rex Ryan has even said it before. I don't pay these guys to tackle. I pay them to cover. So it's a nice bonus to have, though. Ideally, he would definitely be a tough guy, and he does show that toughness for the most part.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't get him burned there because they go with the short pass, but it looked like he opened up really early again, and there was a lot of room on that side of the field.
Yep. Yeah, he didn't come out of his break very well. He sagged off a little bit as the route was breaking. Does a nice job. I mean, he stays back and then right. Yeah, he just doesn't really run it sharply with him. I mean, I don't really know if he did anything tactically too wrong. He just doesn't run with him effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And that may come back. They may come into where the NFL, where these guys have a lot more time to sit there and study these tendencies, package formations and stuff, where you kind of have a better idea what they're going to run.
Yeah.
That's something to remember too. Is that a lot of these guys, they don't watch a lot of tape, and it's not their fault. It's just how it is. So immediately flips open, but that's his duty there. But and you see that a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
He's just watching the quarterback. He's stuck on the quarterback. You got to peep back and know what the receiver's doing there too. I mean, look at that. If that throw,
exactly,
if he just whips
he doesn't
over,
even notice it.
Yep. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, dudes like that catch that way before it even happens. As soon as his guy's starting to break, that ball's on money, and that's an easy 10 to 15-yard gain.
Exactly. I mean, Darby was like 3-4 yards down the field before he even noticed the receiver was turning.
Yep.
And there's really no way you can recover from that.
No. You're just hoping for a bad throw.
Exactly.
And you almost wonder if he just got away with some of this stuff because it was Florida State's defense.
That probably has some validity to it. I mean, this is a really talented defense both this year and last year.
Yeah. It's hard to get much from that. Safety help, just kind of clear out route, get that single coverage.
One thing I sort of think I noticed with Florida State's defense is that they kind of like bringing defensive backs, but when they're bringing a corner, they don't typically bring Darby. They prefer to bring P.J. Williams, and I don't really know if that's an indictment of P.J. Williams' ability and a preference to Darby's. Maybe they think Darby's a better athlete, and they're okay with sending Williams instead. I just thought that was something I noticed.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I didn't really notice that too much. I wonder if that almost has something to do with more of where Ramsey's at. He's really the playmaker of that defense.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. I hadn't really noticed that. Because some teams like to put either the bigger corner or the smaller. It just depends on the team.
Mm-hmm.
They'll flip-flop.
Yeah, I just thought it was weird, because I was watching P.J. Williams recently, and then everything I've seen of Darby, or, on P.J. Williams, it doesn't really seem like, you see that number 3 coming off the edge where you see P.J. Williams kind of creeping towards the line a lot more often.
Right. So that coverage right there looked like he was playing zone. Obviously, just watching the quarterback again, had no idea where the receiver drifted off to. Like to see him at least recognize where the receiver's going, especially once he sees the quarterback heading his way. I still can't believe Miami lost this game.
Oh, I know.
Unbelievable.
That was crazy. I mean, Winston he came out and threw a really incredible second half, so it wasn't really even like Miami blew it. It was just Florida State won.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a tough break for a young team like that.
Hmm.
Good run fill.
Yeah,
Basically all
doesn't
you can
really.
ask from a corner. I mean, just kind of
Yeah,
take up a blocker and hope the linebacker, slips by.
exactly.
He does his job. I mean, that's something that definitely has to be given to him. Is that at least in this defense, he did his job pretty well.
Exactly. I mean, see, even there, he closes off. It looked like he closed off the space, by forcing his blocker back inside, and gives the running back a small hole, and he gets tripped up because of that.
Yep.
I think at this point, Miami was just trying to kill the clock as much as they could.
Yeah, went way too conservative.
Yeah, keep the ball. Yeah, instead of trying to keep the ball to Jameis's hands, they should have just tried to put it in the end zone.
Yeah, that's the one thing that bothered me most about this game is they just didn't just keep doing what works.
Yeah,
You go into
and
a
then
shell, you're just gonna lose.
yeah, like part of me understands, like, well, it was a freshman quarterback, you don't want to put too much
Yeah,
on him. But I don't know, Brad Kite is pretty talented. Like, I would have been, I think I would have been okay, kind of put
yeah.
something on his shoulders and making him put a few more points on the board.
Especially with those playmakers. I mean, they have pretty good playmakers there.
Yeah, Johnson, Warford, or Walford,
Mm-hmm.
Dorsett,
George
Stacey
Dorsett.
Coley.
Yeah. This is where the broadcast angle just kind of gets hard to
See, he slipped again.
slip there. Yeah, you wonder if it's humidity or if the field's a little wet.
Hmm.
That one didn't look like it was balance related. That just looked like slip. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I feel
definitely
like, yeah,
slip.
that had to be something with the field or just, a weird foot setting. So I really won't knock him for
Yeah,
that play.
and even though he was off a little bit, like he wasn't tight coverage, I don't think that should. That's not a loss for me. That's just
Yeah.
they're trying to protect against deep plays. Sometimes you give up 5 or 6 yards on a completion, and it's okay. Like
Yeah.
you take the result of the play.
Hmm.
It's hard. It's important to not kill cornerbacks for allowing those little type of plays.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember Kyle Posey, who's a San Diego Chargers writer, that was a big thing for him when they signed Brandon Flowers. Is everyone
Yeah.
thought Flowers was terrible because he gave up all these catches, but a lot of them were just these short throws in situations where it was okay to give up those yards.
Yeah.
Um, and he proved to be right because Flowers played outstanding last year.
Yeah. Yeah. It really did. It was really funny because I was like, man, Miami needs to go get him. Put
Hmm.
Finnegan in the
Him
slot.
and
Go get
Grimes would
Flowers.
have been fun.
Pe-
That would have been
And
a
people were
fun
like,
combo.
oh, why would you want another small corners? Like, because he's actually really good. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, Darby's interesting. He has some stuff to work on as far as awareness. Awareness definitely stands out to me. He'll lose track of the receiver. I'd rather almost lose track of the quarterback early in a route than the receiver. As soon as because we saw it just a couple times there where the receiver just slipped right by behind him. And Kai is good, but in the NFL he's going to get burned even more than that if he continues to close off early and allow those inside routes to just, especially that post corner route, that you just cannot have that happening. That's something that guys will take advantage of every single game.
And Ian, for you, for the issues you saw with Darby, where would you feel comfortable taking him in the draft?
I've got him as an early third round guy, and admittedly, I do think that the tape on him is a little tough because he was productive, he wasn't targeted a ton, but just as far as kind of how he allowed guys to get open, and that was really the one game that showed it really well. He's not nuanced. He's not experienced with the small things. He's going to take some time. He needs at least a year, I think, to really understand how to better use his feet, how to use his balance. Because he's a very good athlete, and he'll flash the ability to stay in his back pedal until the break of the route. He just doesn't do it, and I don't really think guys get a whole lot better at that. Um, uh, Norman, the guy for Carolina, is a player that got better at that. And the cornerback for Robinson, I think for Minnesota, I think that's his name. He's another guy that got a lot better at it just 1 year after being pretty poor at backpedaling. But that's not something that you see guys really just go from he's a constant hip flipper to backpedaler. And you just really want to be a backpedaler because you want to be balanced. You want to be able to change directions with ease, and you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're starting to close off the sideline, he cuts inside, or vice versa. You're working inside, he goes to the sideline on an out pattern. That's where you really fall into a dangerous trap.
And Derek, for you, what are some things specifically from this game that you took away from?
I'm pretty much with Ian in the awareness being a big issue. There were a number of plays where he was definitely keeping his eye on the quarterback and didn't really know what the receiver was doing. And I kind of agree with Ian. Like, I'd rather at least have my cornerback on the receiver and not know where the ball is than him know where the ball is but have no idea where it's going. You know what I mean? So I think that's definitely a big issue with Darby. Talking about where I'd take him, like I feel like I'd want to watch him a little bit more because I haven't been all that exposed to him. But after this game, he's a good, not great athlete. I'd probably take him, early day 3.
Right, looks like we're having a little bit of technical issue. And Ian, real quickly for you, who's of all the cornerbacks you've seen, who's one you might like the most? It feels underrated.
Underrated. I don't think we've heard much about. I know I've mentioned him a couple times now, but Steven Nelson. I think that's a guy that whether he goes into the slot or whether he plays off the ball, he's got the competitiveness, he's got the athleticism. He's a tough kid, and really the only knocks on him is that he's not going to be a starter for every team. I think Kevin Johnson, I know among draft Twitter, we love him. I think he's going to be a guy that the NFL has proved wrong on next year for not being a higher draft pick. I mean, when you look at impact cornerbacks, those deserve to be top 10 picks, and I don't think I have Johnson quite that high on my board, but I really wouldn't be surprised to see Johnson and Nelson to really prove to be top 32 players in the draft here in a couple of years.
Definitely, man. There's a lot of teams in need of a cornerback. I mean, there's talk about the Green Bay Packers needing outside cornerbacks, so Kevin Johnson inside the top 30 could definitely be a real fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we wrap this up, there's some technical issues on Derek's end, but we have to talk about, Ian, you have your NFL draft guide coming out for BigBoardDraft. So it's uploading right now. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, it just finished. So this is going to be shipping out to everyone everyone that pre-ordered it here in just the next few minutes. So very exciting. So basically it's 256, 257, I think, one of those two. Full player evaluations. I did a ton of illustrations where every player has their own player card. Whether you want to look at this on your phone, it's probably going to be a little big for your phone of a file. It's a 2 gigabyte file, so this thing's massive. But I'm really excited about this, man. I put a lot of work into this. Every player is broken down pretty well. I try to look at it the ways that I've learned that NFL teams do. I'm just really excited about it. I think people are really going to like the illustration part of it, as well as hopefully maybe I prove right on a couple of these picks as well, and I'm sure I'll be wrong plenty of times, but it'll be a good experience. So definitely check that out. It's on BigBoardDraft.com. You can order it. I'll email it to you within 24 hours. Should be much quicker, but I'm just going to play it safe and say 24 hours of you ordering it. Like I said, that just got done, so I'm sending the link out here within the next 10 minutes.
And I have to bring this up because you also mentioned it about a plan of do a giveaway. So what about that?
Yeah. So I don't know if people noticed, but Amazon had a flash sale the other day because James Harden and John Wall just went bananas and they scored like 50 points combined. So they have NBA 2K15 cheap. So I bought a whole bunch of them. So this is for my draft guide. So these are going to be used for promotions. People that have pre-ordered, you're going to be into a contest. I'm just going to pull out some random names, and they'll be the winners. I'm still deciding on how exactly I'm going to give away the rest. Probably be like for every 20 or 30 orders, I'll give away another one. I think that'll probably be fair. So if you haven't ordered yet, go ahead and order. For $5, you get that giant-ass player evaluation guide that I'm sure you're going to love. Even if it's just a talking point, you'll like it, or at least to laugh at me here in a year or two. And you'll be entered to win NBA 2K15. I'm also going to have some for Xbox One as well. So if you have an Xbox One and not a PS4, that's fine.
This draft, guys, just there's a quick preview of it on BigBoardDraft, and just for someone like me, fell behind the draft, or just if you're a basic NFL fan, you want to be caught up on draft day. This is the perfect resource. You said it has like 500 plus pages. Every position mock draft, team needs everything. It's the works, and there's a kitchen sink that comes with it, I believe. So it's just, Ian, credit to you for this.
Thanks, man. It was, looking back, I have no idea how I put this much work into it, but if nothing else, at least I've done it this year, and who knows what will happen moving forward.
So now the question is, moving forward, now that draft guide's over, what are you doing next?
I'm going to go back to some NFL work. I want to do some stuff back there. I want to do some quarterback film. I want to do some more cornerback film. I'm done with college though until like after the draft. So after that, I'll start to look at the college quarterbacks. But for now, I'm going to go back to the NFL, change it up a little bit.
And before we go, because obviously Derrek's tweeted about him, so Derek, what about Trey Waynes? Because obviously there's been a lot of talk ranging from top 15 player, top 20. After watching Trey Waynes, where do you have him?
Trey Waynes is like a third-round player at best. Like we were talking about, change of direction, flipping hips too early, taking false steps, and those are all issues with Trey Waynes that I have. So he's kind of big. He's actually didn't weigh in bigger than Kevin Johnson did, and he's has the speed, but I don't really think he's all that good of a player on tape.
And one with this for each of you, starting with Ian, where can people follow you on Twitter? And 1 year from now, who will have been the best rookie cornerback?
They can follow me on Twitter at NFL Film Study. Best corner a year from now will be Washington's Marcus Peters.
And Derek?
You can find me at QBClass, QBKLASS. You can find some of my work at BigBoardDraft. I've drawn Football Savages. And then I'm going to parallel Ian here and say that Marcus Peters is going to be the best corner.
And I want to thank everyone for checking out the Big Board Draft podcast. Be sure to check out the website at Seth Murphy's just done incredible work putting this together, creating and bringing in excellent staff. So just credit Seth for this, organizing this How to Scout series. More of them coming in the future. It's going to be outstanding. Everyone, I want to thank you for listening.